Welcome to Dram Fine Whiskey. My name is Matt, and today I'm looking at Smoke and Mirrors, which is a peated, stouted single malt coming out of 2 stacks. Now this is actually quite an interesting whiskey, so let me get it into the glass and I'll tell you a bit about it. 2 stacks aren't actually producing the whiskey. They're independent bottlers here in Ireland, and what they're doing is they're sourcing a variety of different whiskies from the Great Northern Distillery in Ireland, and they're bottling them together in interesting new expressions. And one thing I really like about 2 stacks is how transparent they are about their bottling. For example, this whiskey is 30% triple distilled peated malt, 60% triple distilled stout malt, and 10% double distilled malt aged in bourbon barrels. In addition, this whiskey is 40% alcohol, so expect lots of strong, rich flavours. It's not going to be delicate, it's not going to be quiet, it's not going to be muted, it's going to be full flavoured, full bodied, and it's going to really be enjoyable. 2 stacks also have a couple of complex blends, the first cut and the blender's cut, which are very interesting whiskies made of a variety of different types of whiskey or differently finished whiskey, which is a very complex and very interesting blend. But today it's all about the whiskey in front of me, Smoke and Mirrors. Now I did say this is a peated single malt whiskey. Now only 30% of what went into the bottle is actually peated whiskey, but it is still quite a strong component. It is still quite a noticeable component. So let's go in for the nose and I'll tell you all about it. On the nose, up front, there's a lot of chocolatey cocoa notes, and that's going to come from the 60% of the whiskey, which was aged in imperial oatmeal casks. That's a very rich, stout beer. It's going to have a lot of vanilla, it's going to have a lot of cocoa, it's going to have a lot of coffee notes in there as well. So that's a very good beer cask in which to finish a whiskey, because it is going to impart a lot of flavours that complement the whiskey. The peat is definitely noticeable in there as well. There's a peated component. The peat isn't actually a very dominant note. It is more of a smoky note. If you imagine the kind of smoke you get from a charcoal barbecue, that kind of gentle smoke that hangs around, it lingers, but it's not really a powerful, punchy note. It's not really going to overpower the rest of the whiskey. And I think that's what they were going for. I mean, they could have chosen a higher percentage of peated single malt whiskey to go into the blend, and that probably would have given it a much more pronounced note. That peated note would have been much more for it, but what they were aiming for here was that peated stouted combination. I think they've hit the nail on the head here, at least on the nose. So let's try it for the palate. Okay, the peat much more apparent in the palate. It is up front, it is kind of mouth coating, but it doesn't really last very long. The peat kind of comes up and then subsides, and what you're left with is this kind of mouth coating cocoa coffee note that comes from those imperial oatmeal casks. When I say cocoa, don't think like a hot cocoa with milk and sugar. Think of that dark, rich, kind of almost slightly bitter cocoa powder taste you get that kind of dries out your mouth. It's very rich, it's very chocolatey, it's very rich, and it does hang around, and it creates an almost kind of red wine tannic feeling in your mouth where it dries out the side of your cheek. It's actually very pleasant to drink. And similarly, when I talk about the coffee note, don't think latte, don't think Americano, think that espresso note, that kind of, again, slightly bitter, rich, concentrated note of coffee you get from an espresso. And underneath it all, there is a nice vanilla note. Now, 10% of this whiskey was aged in bourbon barrels, but like I said, that finishing of 60% of this whiskey in the imperial oatmeal casks is going to impart more vanilla as well. So I think the vanilla is a strong component in here. It gives a lot of sweetness, it gives a nice base from which the other flavours can stand. So let's try it again. Okay, on the second go round, I'm getting almost a little bit of a floral sweetness in there. I wouldn't say it's like rose petal water or anything like that. It's just a little bit of kind of floral sweetness coming through. It's actually quite a pleasant note. It's kind of bright and shiny and kind of stands out from those rich cocoa notes, the rich coffee notes, the rich peated notes. It kind of helps just kind of make the whiskey a little bit more complex on the palate, makes it a little bit more enjoyable to drink. There's definitely a lot in this whiskey, there's definitely a lot to unpack in this whiskey. It's quite rich, it's quite complex. At 48% alcohol, you are going to get a lot of rich, strong flavours up front. So if you want, you could add a drop of water to this, maybe open up some of those notes. If you find that it's very strong, it's maybe too strong up front, you can definitely open up this whiskey without sacrificing on the flavour. And now let's talk about the finish. The finish, like I said, that kind of red wine tannic note is very present. It kind of dries out the side of your mouth, kind of tingly, a little bit spicy. It's very pleasant. It hangs around a long while. It's not like one of those whiskies that just you finish and it's gone. It does hang around a while. That coffee note, it does hang on for a while. The vanilla is definitely there, balanced with the cocoa. I'd say the longest note I'm getting out of this is probably that cocoa powder note. If you've ever had like a spoonful of cocoa powder, you know that you're tasting that for a long time after you've had it. It's that kind of note, that kind of dryness, the richness, the coffee note is there. The peat is there, it's present. It doesn't hang around forever. That cocoa note is the one that I think kind of hangs around the most for me. It's very pleasant, it's very enjoyable. I kind of want to go back for more. And that's about all there is to say about this whiskey. I find it quite enjoyable. I've definitely gone back to it a lot of times in recent days. I've reached past other whiskies to go for this one. I quite like it. It's quite a nice balance of that stout, of that peat, of that kind of vanilla bourbon finishing. It is quite a nice whiskey, and I'd say it'll definitely be one I keep on my shelf. So if you like this video, maybe give me a thumbs up, maybe hit that subscribe button down below. I put out a new review every Wednesday, I put out a new cocktail every Friday. So until next time, Sláinte.